Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Chesterton's Jest, where we keep a critical eye on faith and culture, especially within the Catholic Church today. In an age where even church teachings seem to be shifting, we're here to explore and question the ideas and changes that challenge timeless truths. Through thought-provoking, often humorous perspectives, we aim to bring clarity to conversations others might avoid, holding fast to orthodoxy with the courage to question what feels off track. If you would like to join us as we dig deeper into the faith with reverence, wit, and a touch of Chestertonian insight, you can support this channel by gently pressing the like, share, and subscribe buttons in that order, and we thank you for your support. And now, without further ado, the Bishop, the President, and the politics of preaching. Modern man is fixated on keeping the church and state separate, but it's essential to ask why. The recent spectacle of Bishop Mariann Budde using her pulpit to lecture President Trump serves as a stark reminder that this separation is often misunderstood. It's like a man building a wall without considering what he's fencing in or out, only to create a mess of contradictions. The term separation of church and state is often treated as sacred, as though it were inscribed on tablets of stone. In reality, it has become a crude and reactionary tool, often misused to silence faith rather than preserve its rightful role. Bishop Budde's sermon, far from preserving the sanctity of the pulpit, exploited the moment for political purposes, turning a sacred act of worship into a stage for social justice agendas. Chapter 1. The Pulpit for Preaching or Politics. The pulpit should be a space for reflection, not political posturing. In a sermon, the preacher holds a unique authority to speak to the souls of the faithful. This authority is meant to guide, convict, and inspire toward the eternal truths of the gospel. Yet when Bishop Budde used her moment in the pulpit not to preach Christ's mercy, but to scold the president over issues like immigration and LGBTQ+ rights, she blurred the line between sacred and secular. This wasn't a call for mercy rooted in the Christian tradition, but a thinly veiled political lecture. It was not about the mercy of God, but the mercy she deemed appropriate for certain political causes. Politics has no place in such a setting, particularly when it is used to push a partisan agenda under the guise of faith. Chapter 2. A sermon for mercy or for political gain. Bishop Budde's appeal for mercy toward marginalized groups sounded like a moral plea, but in reality, it was more about promoting her personal political views. She called for mercy on behalf of LGBTQ+ individuals and immigrants, framing the president's policies as lacking compassion. But mercy in the Catholic tradition isn't about political correctness. It's about justice, truth, and love for all people, especially the vulnerable. In using the pulpit for such political purposes, she turned what should have been a moment of spiritual reflection into a campaign speech. This misuse of the sacred space was not an expression of Christ's mercy, but an endorsement of policies that may or may not align with the broader moral good. Mercy, in its true form, recognizes the dignity of every person, but it cannot be detached from the natural law or the truths of the faith. Chapter 3. The Pulpit as Political Stage. What made Budde's actions particularly troubling was the timing and the setting, a prayer service located in a space dedicated for such events where the faithful gather to be uplifted spiritually, not to be lectured on political issues. In a sacred moment, when the congregation is expected to listen in reverence, the pulpit should not become a political platform. While it's clear that the Church has a role in advocating for justice, turning the sermon into a political speech does a disservice to both the Church and the broader political discourse. It was a sermon that attempted to politicize the sacred, to inject secular concerns into a space where divine truth should reign. When Bishop Budde called out President Trump, she overstepped the bounds of her role as a shepherd of souls. Instead of calling people to repentance, compassion, and the eternal truths of the gospel, she turned her homily into a message that would likely have been more fitting for a political rally. Chapter 4. The Unholy Alliance of Politics and Preaching. Bishop Budde's sermon raises the uncomfortable truth that the modern secularist, in his desire to keep politics and religion separate, often ends up doing the exact opposite. She sought to use the sacred space of the pulpit not only to critique a sitting president, but to align herself with a political cause. The unfortunate result is that the Church, in her attempt to speak truth to power, risks being co-opted by the very forces it should remain independent of. The Church was meant to be a beacon of moral clarity, but in such moments it can easily become a tool for political manipulation. The separation of church and state was never meant to silence the Church, but to keep her from being swayed by the fickle tides of political winds. When the pulpit becomes a place for political preaching, the message of Christ is drowned out. Chapter 5. Mercy without justice is a hollow plea. The mercy that Bishop Budde advocated for was politically charged, advocating for certain groups at the expense of broader justice. True mercy, as defined in Catholic teaching, always upholds the dignity of the person in line with God's natural law. When mercy becomes nothing more than a political tool to push social agendas, it ceases to be mercy at all. The Church must stand firm in its teachings and offer real compassion, not by pandering to political correctness, but by pointing people to the truth of the gospel. Policies that ignore the moral order and the common good cannot be justified by appeals to mercy alone. A mercy that ignores the moral truths of the faith ultimately becomes a counterfeit, no different from any other form of political opportunism. Chapter 6. Restoring the boundaries. The solution isn't to collapse the wall between church and state entirely, but to remember why it was built in the first place, to protect the integrity of both. The Church exists to proclaim the eternal truths of God, while the state handles temporal matters. But when these two realms become hostile, or worse, when the Church is hijacked by political motives, the very purpose of this separation is lost. The Church cannot be used as a vehicle for partisan agendas, nor can the state demand that the Church abandon her moral compass. Both must remain faithful to their distinct roles, for when they do, society flourishes in balance. Politics should be debated in the public square, while sermons should remain dedicated to guiding souls toward truth and salvation. Chapter 7. A Warning and a Hope. In the end, the trouble with separation of church and state is not the separation itself, but the forgetting of why it exists, to preserve the church's prophetic voice and the state's humility. When the church is silenced or manipulated into endorsing political agendas, it loses its ability to speak the truth, and the state, unchecked by moral clarity, becomes a force for oppression. If the church is to remain faithful to her mission, she must resist the temptation to align herself with political causes that contradict the natural law and the common good. In doing so, she will remain a voice for mercy that is grounded in truth, justice, and the eternal wisdom of God. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed today's video and share our passion for defending the true faith with a touch of humor, be sure to head over to chestertonsjest.com and check out our collection of bold, pro-Catholic graphic tees designed to spark conversation and inspire conviction. Whether you're looking to wear your faith proudly or share a laugh, we've got something for everyone. Visit us today and join the movement, because in times like these, it's more important than ever to stand firm in our beliefs with style and wit. As Chesterton once said, "A madman is not someone who has lost his reason. A madman is someone who has lost everything except his reason." So, let's keep our reason and our faith intact together. Thanks for listening. God bless you, and may the good Lord be praised.